So this morning I want to have a confessional moment with you all. I feel comfortable doing that with you here because many of you raised your hands earlier when you said that it was hard to tell, you had complicated truths to tell in your lives. This past summer, I had both the beautiful and the terrifying experience of leading worship for hundreds of UUs at a Unitarian Universalist summer camp. These worship services were wonderful, and we were meeting to plan them ahead of time. We collaborated, we planned ahead, we were ready. And so on one of the first nights when we led worship together, I was leading with another woman, and we decided that we were going to tell this story, but we were going to use puppets. And she had puppets that represented many different racial backgrounds. And we decided that we were going to use these two puppets and sort of inserted race into this story in a way that we might have not quite thought through all the way. Well, after the service was done, I felt pretty good. I felt like, oh, that service went pretty well. Folks were complimentary as they were leaving in the receiving line. And I woke up the next day refreshed, ready to lead worship again that next morning. And a friend of mine came over to me during breakfast, and she said, you know, a member from the church that I'm at came up to me last night and said that he was really offended following this worship service. He said he was wondering when we would trot out puppets that represented his cultural background as a person of color. And he felt like this was a caricature of people of color. Well, in that moment, I certainly felt some fear, and I knew that I had made a big mistake that had hurt someone in our community. Well, I had a couple of days of both that pit in my stomach, like Evan was talking about, and some restless nights of sleep, and then came my turn to preach again. I was part of a 5-person team, so we were rotating. So then came my turn to preach again. And I decided I was preaching about making mistakes, times when we fall and we need to get back up again. And I decided that this was a time for truth-telling for me. And I came before that community of hundreds of UUs and claimed the mistake that I had made and told the truth and was honest with people about what had happened. Now, being honest with folks did not undo the hurt or the harm that I caused to this person and possibly others there who I didn't know I had hurt. But that peace about truth-telling, it was a moment, a transformational moment for me, a time to own a mistake that I had made. And granted, not all of us have this space to tell the truth from, but when you have access to it, telling the truth from this space is so deeply important. And truth-telling can be so complicated, can't it? But what I can tell you from my experience is that truth-telling can also be so liberating, can't it? Because at the end of that worship service, I felt a piece of that burden had been lifted. And in the conversations that followed, I felt like a piece of that burden continued to lift. And we need more truth-telling in our lives. Honesty has the power to heal and transform. When we are being honest, we are honoring our best selves. And I don't say this just because we should tell the truth, right? Because I feel like that's oftentimes, I did not want that to be the moral of our story today for our young people. I feel like there's so many stories that end with, we should tell the truth, right? Honesty is one of the highest virtues we are called to as human beings. It inspires trust, it inspires dialogue, and it is one of the building blocks of health, both in our relationships with others and within ourselves. We are called to be honest because dishonesty is self-destructive. In some of the ways our reading outlined this morning, thank you for reading that, Andy. To tell the truth is life-giving. Even in those moments when it feels hard, and perhaps especially in those moments when it feels hard to tell the truth is life-giving. Have you ever heard that small voice speaking inside your head? That voice inside that is heeding our best interests, that voice of truth-telling, that voice behind some of the pit in our stomach or the funny feeling. Some would call it instinct or intuition. It's the voice that gives us pause and gives us direction. Most of us have this voice inside, and I do believe it is an honest voice. Each day we are given a choice about whether or not to heed that voice. We have a choice about listening to that honest voice within each of us, and we have a choice about our actions, what to do in light of that inner voice. Internal listening is key here, and that listening takes some practice. Some listen to that inner voice in meditation or in prayer or in quiet. When people talk about hearing a voice from God while in prayer, I often think about it as being this voice of intuition that wants what's best for us. And this is not to take the mystery out of the source of that voice, as there is still some mystery here. Why do we have these honest instincts inside of ourselves? It's a hard question to answer. In the spirit of truth-telling with you all this morning, I had been trying not to listen to that voice while we were worship planning for this service I just talked to you all about. I decided to ignore that voice inside for a little while, thinking that it was just me or that I was being overly sensitive. I stuffed it down and continued forward with the plan out of some sort of sense of duty. In other times in my life, with prolonged silence or dishonesty, I know the truth came out in ways I wasn't aware of at the time. In ways I was over-caffeinating myself, or the things I did after work to relax. Ignoring that truth-telling voice helped me to continue to get by, but in some ways, I wasn't really living. I was mostly surviving in those moments. Have you ever had an experience like this where intuition was telling you one thing and you decided to do another? Have you ever had that experience before? I'm seeing some nods. Yeah. To align our lives with our own inner honesty and truth-telling is powerful. Claiming our truth gives us space to fully claim who we are. It is something we know, something that seems so glaringly obvious, but still is not always easy to do. Honoring our truth can be risky, especially when we have to face ways we have hurt others in the past or in the present, or ways we might anticipate hurting others by telling the truth. What I know is that when we face the harm we have caused in other people's lives and genuinely own it, we release the shame or the guilt or the fear we have been holding in our hearts. A burden is lifted from us. We do no one any favors by running from our own truth, least of all ourselves. To claim our truth is both powerful and humbling. To be honest about who we are, what we are feeling, where we are being led, so powerful and so humbling. It can feel like a self-split in two when we do not align ourselves with our personal truth, similar to the ways Glennon Doyle was talking about. There's being dishonest or less than honest with other people, and then there's being dishonest within ourselves. We can tell ourselves we are fine when we know we absolutely aren't. We can tell ourselves we aren't afraid when our instincts are telling us that this is a scary situation and we need to get out of it as soon as possible. There are ways lying to ourselves can work in our favor in keeping a good face on a situation, in moments of survival, in times when we need to just fake it in the short term so we can make it in the long run. And then there are ways that we lie to ourselves for so long that we no longer know who we really are at our core. I think about friends and family who spent years living in the closet, afraid of who we were at our very core, afraid of the reactions, the possible isolation, the ways friends and families might treat us if they really knew that we were gay or bisexual or transgender. Lying to ourselves is dangerous. It can cause an internal tear, damage inside of us that takes so much time and attention to heal. And we can work to fill the emptiness that lying to ourselves has caused with food or alcohol or other people or religion or any number of vices. When we lie to ourselves, our very core is wounded. And hurt people hurt people. This isn't just an internal process. It comes out in our relationships, in our actions, in how we are with people who pass through our days and through our lives. And the only way to recover, to get ourselves out from this difficult place, is to embrace truth-telling, to embrace honesty within ourselves and with those around us. When we tell the truth, our lives begin to heal. It can take quite a bit of practice after ignoring that voice, and I know it still takes practice for me. Aligning ourselves with our instinct, our intuition honors that voice within and creates a much healthier relationship to self. Honesty, rigorous, deep honesty, is a path towards healing ourselves and loving ourselves. And do I have any RuPaul's Drag Race fans here? Any folks that love it? Yes? Yes? Well, like the prophet RuPaul says, if you can't love yourself, how in the hell are you going to love somebody else? Can I get an amen? Amen. All right. As Unitarian Universalists, our theological ancestors have been called upon to tell the truth through the ages, and we answer that call. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "The soul is the perceiver and the revealer of truth. We know truth when we see it. Let skeptic and scoffer say what they choose. Foolish people ask you when you have spoken what they do not wish to hear, how do you know it is truth and not an error of your own? We know the truth when we see it, from opinion as we know when we are awake that we are awake." In this essay, he is talking about who we are at our deepest core as human beings. We know truth when we see it in others and when we see it in ourselves. It is hard to quantify exactly how we know it, but we know it as plain as whether we are awake or not. We know truth when we speak it aloud from the different feel in our bodies, from the sense we get from being genuinely honest with others, a sense of calmness and peacefulness. In the depths of our being, I believe that is what we desire for all people: a calm, peaceful, joy-filled, fulfilling life. And so much of that begins with honesty. To grow our souls, to grow along spiritual lines, we must practice honesty within and with others. The political times we are living in have called many of us to tell our truths through public witness, in writing, in conversation, and for many, on social media. Truth-telling and justice work are inseparable in Unitarian Universalism. We take part in justice struggles because we believe there are true and right ways to be in relationship as a community and as a country. A common phrase used for prophetic speaking and preaching is speaking truth to power. And when we're doing that, it feels good, doesn't it? Yeah. This movement moment is calling us to be more bold in speaking truth about injustice, white supremacy, power structures that continually keep some in power and hold others oppressed. And it is so important to honor this truth-telling as it makes a difference in our own lives, in our neighbors' lives, and in the life of our country. And I would say that this movement moment right now has many on edge. Have you felt it? It's this edginess that comes from fear, from feeling tired or feeling burned out. It shows up in ways that we can be snappy with one another, less patient, wanting folks to be on board and ready for the fight ahead, even if they need a little more time. Just come on, we gotta get to work. We gotta get to work, right? I see this especially in our social media communications. How many folks here have been drawn into a conversation on Facebook or somewhere else where you find yourself debating folks you know or even folks you don't know about who is right? Any folks here? Yes, yes. It's everywhere. It's in our families, it's in our friendships, it's on the internet, it's everywhere. We are living in polarizing times. Polarizing times where one person's truth is exclusive of another person's truth, where there is an us versus them dynamic to truth. And what does this mean for Unitarian Universalists who seek to tell the truth? If we are constantly and continuously, ceaselessly weighing in on debates with our own truth, it can be exhausting. It has the power to drain us of our energy, patience, joy, important life-giving forces. As you use, we are called to tell the truth, but do we have to do it everywhere? Uh-oh. Do we have to engage that friend of a friend of a friend on a verbal sparring match over Facebook? Or how about that friend or loved one who has already made up their mind and they have different political views from you? Continuing the conversation can be exhausting. In times like these, we must be discerning about where our truth-telling is most effective and where it makes a difference. We need discernment because constantly and continuously telling our truth can be exhausting. We need discernment because our truth is precious and is not always going to be received for the gift that it is. We need discernment for those moments when truths need to be spoken, when a situation calls for honesty and we are willing to answer the call. And in the spirit of discernment, I recommend beginning with a deep breath. Just like how we started our service this morning. And then just a quick on-the-spot assessment, just in the moment. Is this a conversation or a dialogue that I am having? Is this a space where I feel safe and able to tell the truth? Is my truth and the way I am going to share it in alignment with my values and with that honest voice within? As Unitarian Universalists, many of us can speak with bravest fire, but if that truth is not honoring the worth and dignity of the other person, is it worth telling? I know there are times when I can get caught in a self-righteousness which is about speaking my truth but does not honor the truth of another. I know I'm right. It's not always the best place to operate from, right? Honesty is sacred. Conversations with others are sacred and holy. And we are called to honor that sacred nature in our words and actions. It must begin with internal reflection. It must begin with that alignment within ourselves of knowing who we are and what our truth is before speaking it aloud. To honor that inherent truth teller inside each of us, we must spend time listening to that intuitive voice within ourselves and aligning our words and actions with what that voice is telling us. In being honest with ourselves and with those around us, we invite honesty into our lives from others. May you know your truth at the very core of your being. May you speak your truth as the situation calls for, and may more honesty come into our lives and into the world that heals and transforms. Amen. Blessed be. May it be so.